Mr. Jason Duncan, I am so honored that you're here today. Thanks for recording with me and being here on the podcast.
It's great to be here, man. I'm honored that you asked me to be here, so thanks.
Well, first tell us, you were living the real exit lifestyle, and I want you to give us some insight onto what that really means. But tell us where you are, tell us where you're recording from, give us some perspective.
So I am recording right now on the literally about 20 feet outside this RV is the Caribbean Ocean. And I'm in Key West and here for about 8 days on a 2-week trip with my wife and our RV. And we do this, we try to go somewhere at least a week a month, most months of the year. And we don't typically go in the wintertime or November, December, January. It's not technically all winter, but we don't usually do this, but this is kind of new for us. We left the day after Thanksgiving in 2021, and we're down here for 8 days at this campsite. We camped in the Everglades a couple of nights ago. We were in South Georgia before that. So I'm in a makeshift office in my RV, and we converted the bunk room into a place for me to work. So I've got my laptop, and I got my camera, my microphone. I got everything I need to do all my coaching calls right here in Key West or wherever I want to go.
I knew we were connected in some way because I finally found another fellow RVer. I just got back, same thing, from a 10-day RV trip and sort of fallen in love with RVing the last couple of years. I have a couple young kids, so it's just this really special way to spend time and live out that freedom and just really connect. There's nothing like it. So super cool that you're doing it and running your business. You're actually not the first one that I've met before that is literally recording and running a company out of their RV. So I just think it's amazing. So cool. And you really are the subject matter expert of this topic of, exiting your business and running a company with freedom in mind and what the business means to you. Tell us a little bit about exit without exiting. Tell us about running, what you talk about.
So I was an accidental entrepreneur about a little over a decade ago. I'd spent 13 years in pastoral ministry, and then I spent 4 years as a school teacher. So I've got a bachelor's degree in ministry, a master's degree in education, and I'm a teacher at heart. That's what I've always wanted to do. I feel like I'm especially gifted at teaching and helping break down complex concepts in a way that other people can understand. And that's what I've done in my entire career. Well, coming out of the Great Recession in 2010, 2011, the school district where I was working had budget cuts, and I didn't have tenure in the system where I was working at the time, even though I was the number one teacher in the county, according to test scores. My students were performing better than any other group of kids, but it didn't matter. That's how they made decisions to cut teachers, was on tenure. So I was the last guy hired, first guy let go, and I found myself wondering what to do next. And at that time in our world economy, I couldn't get a teaching job anywhere. Nobody was hiring teachers. So I decided I'll just run the company. I'll start my own business. And so I did, and I gave myself a deadline. And I said, if I don't do anything by this time, I will go get a quote real job somewhere. And I hit my deadline. I closed what turned out to be a $2.3 million deal 3 days before my deadline. Now, I didn't get all that money. That for your listeners to understand, I didn't get all that money right then. It took a long time. When you do big deals like that, it takes a long time to get the money. But I met my deadline, and from that point forward, I built a multi-million-dollar business that ended up getting recognized in Inc. Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, many national publications. And I was living a lifestyle that I never could have imagined as a former pastor and school teacher. But I woke up, I hired a business coach about 7 years in. And I wish I'd have hired him day one, honestly. And that's what I tell people all the time. You should hire a business coach day one. And I hired this business coach, and he opened my eyes. And he started showing me, hey, you're really, he didn't use the language that I use when I coach my clients now, but he was saying, you're trapped in your business. You've got a very successful company. You're making a lot of money, but you're required. You have to be here every single day in the office. to make this thing work. And he was right. And I thought, well, how do I get out of it? Because it was in the LED business, by the way. And I was never passionate or had any particular affinity to LED lighting or electrical contracting. So I said, well, how do I get out of this? And what was the answer? Most people would say, well, let's sell it. We were doing millions of dollars in revenue. Surely we could sell this thing. Well, the reality was it wasn't worth anything because I was at the center of it all. And that reality, punched me in the face. I'm thinking, you mean I got a business doing X millions of dollars and I'm making X millions of dollars, and I can't sell it? Nope, because it's me. Like I'm the business. I had at one point I had over 30 something employees. I think at the time when I started these conversations, we were in the around 20 or so employees. And it was at that moment that I made the decision, okay, if I can't sell it, I've got to build it really quickly in a way that it could get me out of the weeds so that eventually I could sell it. And that's what I did. And I discovered to do something, what I now refer to as exit without exiting, even though I didn't know what I was doing at the time. It took me about 18 months, but I put together a plan and got out of the daily operations of the company. And now, since I've been able to exit the daily operations of the company, I've gone out and started, I think, 5 other companies. I travel a lot, just like what we talked about at the top. I travel a lot. I get to do what I want to do. And I'm living the exit lifestyle without having to have actually exited the business.
Let's slow that down, because I think that there's so much meat in all of those steps you just mentioned. And I think there's a lot of, like I said before we started recording, is, as a business owner and entrepreneur who actually has started a business, and I know a lot of listeners have, just the sheer step of understanding that you are your biggest limit to the freedom that you're really trying to talk about here, of the business has no value without you. We also identify very closely with most of our businesses, right? And I'm sure you've done that as well. It's like your business is your identity. It is, what do you mean that somebody else can run my company? What do you mean that somebody can do it better than me? This cannot be processified. You can't hire somebody to do this, blah, blah, blah. You could tell me 1,000 stories. Tell me about what you experience with your clients and what you see as a recurring behavior there, because I'm just thinking, just in my own journey, and I know a lot of other listeners here have the same experience of like, I love that, and I think that's really great, Jason, but this is all theoretical. Like, I am my company, and there's no way for me to detach from that, and even if it's a painful detachment, correct?
So I went through a terrible identity crisis when I exited daily operations.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people go through that, because for years I'd identified and introduced myself as the president and CEO of Energy Lighting Services. That was the name of my company, still is. By the way, I still own the company, but I identified as that guy, the president and CEO. And so when I was still the president, but I had put somebody else in as CEO, how do I introduce myself? As silly as that sounds, so I had my business coach and I worked through that for months. What do I do? What do I do now? I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know that. As a matter of fact, there's another business coach and I are going to be putting on a retreat, a workshop next year, actually here in Florida where I am now. We're going to be doing a weekend retreat called What's Next. And it's exactly for people that were going through what I went through, this identity crisis. But you asked me the question, you said, what do I see in my clients when I'm coaching people? Because that's what I do. 90% of my active hours time now is coaching people through how to exit without exiting. Mm-hmm. And I run an exit accelerator, and it's fantastic. But here's the first thing I have to tackle. And it's a lie. The first thing I have to tackle is the lie that people tell themselves. People say, I love my business. I don't want to exit my business. I want to keep doing this. I got 3 to 5 more years, 10 more years. I'm good. Okay. That is a lie that we all tell ourselves. And the lies that hurt the worst are the ones that we tell ourselves, is because we say we love our business. And I don't argue with the fact that you don't get enjoyment out of it. But the reality is, if you were able to make a choice every single day to either go in the office and do that thing, or go do something else, whatever the else is. I don't care if you want to go to the Florida Keys like I'm doing this week. If you want to ride your motorcycle across the country, if you want to go do mission work in India, whatever you want to do, if you have that option every day, you can't tell me that every day you choose the office, because you're lying to yourself if you do. And so the reality is, the first thing I have to deal with people is the fact that they lie to themselves. That's the number one. And once they come to the realization that, yeah, Jason, I really would like options. I love my business and I don't really want to sell it. I want to keep it. But how do I get out of it, the daily stuff? So once I get them to kind of admit that, that's the starting point.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't really own a business then, you own a job.
Exactly. You trade a 9 to 5 in the corporate world for 24/7, and you wanted to be your own boss, and you've ended up becoming your own employee, and you have to be there. And if you don't show up, you don't get paid. That's not any way to live as an entrepreneur. Yet so many do.
I guess another thing that could potentially come up is, what are people going to think? What are my employees going to think? What are my partners going to think? What are my customers going to think? How do you address those concerns?
Well, the next thing we've got to deal with once they get over the lie is we deal with this thing that I refer to as hero syndrome.
Oh, yeah, baby.
And hero syndrome happens to almost every entrepreneur, is that they love being the hero. They love putting on the cape. They love flexing. They love showing up when the bat light goes off in the sky or the red phone rings. They show up and they solve the problem. And at first, you have to do that. That is absolutely essential to starting your company. You've got to be the hero. You've got to show up because you're better at it. You're better equipped. You know more. You're probably better funded than everybody else. Like, you are the hero. But the reality is, even in the comic books, the hero can only save the people he or she understands need help. Gotham City's a big city. Metropolis is a big city. You can't be everywhere.
Can't heal everybody.
You can't heal everybody. There's still people going to get robbed. There's still bad things going to happen. You can't be everybody's hero. So the best thing to do is you understand, okay, I've been the hero for a while. I've got to teach other people to step up. I got to teach other people to become the heroes for the company that we all need. It can't just be me, because we think that being the hero is noble. We think that it's great that every time there's a problem, I show up and I fix it. You think that's noble when in reality it's selfish. Let me explain what I mean. It's selfish because if in fact you have a dozen employees or so, or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter how many you've got, 2 or 3 employees, a dozen or 100, if they're all reliant upon you to make it work, if you are the cog in the center of that machine that makes everything work, and you love being the hero and you think it's noble that you show up, it's actually selfish. And here's why. Because if you remove yourself permanently or even semi-permanently, either voluntarily or involuntarily, what happens to the business?
It's at risk.
Well, it's a risk. You've set every single one of your employees and their families up at a terrible risk because you want to play the hero every day. Give me a break. Come on. You designed the business to serve first and foremost your needs as a family. But then once you start hiring employees, you've taken on that responsibility to provide for them and their families. And if the provision for them is also on your shoulders, that's not selfish. That's not noble. That's selfish. And you've got to get out of the hero work.
And what are we really talking about? Are we talking about people, process? That sounds kind of obvious, but is that what we're really talking about? Or is it mostly a mindset thing? Is like, what are we really going after here?
Well, it all starts with mindset. And I think you hit the nail on the head. First starts with mindset. You got to stop telling yourself lies. You got to get out of the hero syndrome and understand that you can't scale this thing. It's not scalable with you as the hero. Mm-hmm. So those are mindset issues you got to get past. But once the mindset issues get past, now you have to start actually doing things. And I teach people in my Exit Accelerator group coaching cohort the 4 things that I did. Concrete things. These are the things that I did to get myself out of the daily operations so that the business could grow beyond my ability to grow it by myself. And the first thing is embracing delegation. And I know that every entrepreneur understands that, at least
intellectually,
intellectually they understand, okay, I've got to delegate. But what does that mean? Well, you've got to empower other people to act on your behalf and on the company's behalf. And in order to empower them, you have to train them, you have to trust them, you've got to give them the tools that they need to accomplish the work. And you have to understand there's going to be a dip in outcome. There's going to be a dip in productivity, and you have to survive the dip. There's going to be, when you say, okay, Mary, you're going to do this job, or okay, John, you're going to do this job, and I'm going to show you how to do it, I used to do it all the time. I'm going to get now to you to do this. They're not going to do it as good as you did. They're not going to do it, but eventually they will. I've got a good story. I've got a guy he's my longest tenured employee at the company I've owned the longest. I hired him straight out of graduate school. He knew nothing about the lighting industry. He was interested in energy, but he knew nothing about the lighting industry. When I hired him, I could walk circles around him, understanding lighting, how to do audits, and how to specify. I knew it all better than him, but I had to I had to delegate roles to him, and he sucked at it at first. But over time, he became much better at it. And today, he could walk circles around me in lighting. He's lighting certified now. He knows more about lights than I do. He can specify. He's got relationships with our vendors that I don't have anymore. That's what delegation does. It was a dip at first. I survived it, and now my company's better off, and we make more money without me doing all that.
So first is delegation, then?
Eliminate stress. You got to eliminate stress, and stress is a killer. Most people think that stress is caused by the endurance of stressful situations. In reality, stress is caused by too many open cycles at any one time. And an open cycle is any task or requirement that has a beginning, a change, and a stop. A beginning, a change,
a loop. Wow, that's so good.
In a loop, cycle. So like a text message that you haven't answered, an email you haven't answered, those are open cycles. But also that report that you have to write, that's an open cycle. Or somebody's asked you for a favor, that's an open cycle. Somebody needs to borrow money, that's an open cycle. Bills that are due, all of those add up, and those are open cycles. And the reason we get stressed in life is because we have too many open at the same time. Because all of us, especially your listeners, are capable of handling any task as long as it's the only one they have to deal with. But you add that to every single thing else on their list, that becomes stressful. And stressed out entrepreneurs and stressed out companies and stressed out employees never lead to success. So the next thing, once you've embraced delegation, is you've got to start understanding how to manage stress and close cycles. And there's this law called the law of open cycles that I teach my clients about how to manage those laws. That law of open cycles, how to manage your open cycles and how to keep them closed. And once you understand it, that language starts to permeate everything you do. It's between you and your husband or wife, you and your kids, you and your employees, you and your friends. This open cycle terminology becomes it becomes part of the vocabulary. Everybody understands. If somebody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, you can go, have you done an open cycles inventory lately? No, I haven't. That's why you're stressed out. You need to sit down and do it. They'll sit down, they understand how to do it, and they come back, all right, ready to tackle the world. Let's go. So you got to eliminate stress.
That's so powerful. And I just got so much from that too, because you're talking about like an open energy loop, and that we could have in relationships, we could have in our work. And so what you're saying is we got to do an inventory of what are all of our open energy loops that are potentially sucking on us, sucking the energy out of us, which ultimately creates stress.
That's right.
Very powerful. Okay, what's number 3? So good.
So number 3 goes to what you mentioned at the beginning. It's about systems and processes. So you embrace delegation, you eliminate stress, and then you establish systems and processes. And there's a reason you do it in this order. And I go into this quite deeply in my Exec Accelerator. But the establishment of processes and systems is really, really important. But they're meaningless if you still have stressed out people, and they're meaningless if you haven't actually learned how to delegate. So the systems and processes, if you're the only one doing it, won't matter. Right. So I talk about how that you must systematize and make processes for every single thing in your business. But the thing that's the most important system in your entire business is the sales system. Because without sales, there is no money. Without money, there is no business. With no business, what are you for? Like, you're going to have to go get a job or do something different. So your sales system is really, really important. So part of what I teach my clients, and this is actually based on not just my experience as an entrepreneur, but my 20 plus years of selling. I've sold, even when I was in ministry, I was also in sales. I was selling life and health insurance to small business owners, kind of bivocationally. So I've been in sales a long, long time. And so I took all of the knowledge of sales and figured how could I set up a system inside my company that would systematize and processize, if that's the right word, make a process for sales that doesn't rely on me, that my employees can run without me. And there were 3 pieces to that I identified. I didn't really realize that's what we were doing, but We identified those three pieces. We put them in as our process, and that changed everything. Not I wasn't the number one salesman anymore, because now all my people knew how to sell and they knew how to follow the same system. So part of your journey to exit without exiting is going to require you to set up a proper sales system.
I like how you said that, because you really do need to focus on, I think a lot of people focus on accounting and SOPs and project management and, manufacturing quality standards, but it really does start right from the top. And how do we engage our customer? Is that repeatable? How can we measure the performance of that? How can we repeat it over and over and over and scale it, and then just work downwards? Number 4.
That's right. So the fourth one is about your people, and that's investing in your people. You are into real estate investing. You're interested in that. It's part of what you talk about on your show. Investing, as most people would understand, is the deployment of money and or other resources with the expectation of a return. So when you invest in people, so what is your return? So I could go a little bit spiritual in my understanding of investments. I know that Jesus said, we should not lay up for ourselves or store for ourselves treasure here on earth, but store them up in heaven. When I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, he's actually using the word invest. He goes, don't invest here, invest there. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly. How do I send Bitcoin ahead? What do I do? How do I get
Bitcoin ahead?
How do I get my investments to go ahead of me? And the reality hit me is like, okay, the only things that move from this life to the next are people. So we've got to invest in people. So that's not just a business thing for me. It's a life thing. I want to make sure that I invest in people. That's part of the reason I run an apprenticeship program, is because I want to invest in people. It's one of the ways that I invest in people. But in business, if you want to exit, you have to invest in your people. And so what is investing at the base? It's the deployment of time, energy, resources, money with the expectation of a return. So if I want to invest in my people, what do I expect? I expect a return. So if I'm going to sit down with Ricky as an employee and say, okay, Ricky, here's what I need you to do. I'm investing time and training. I might even give him a raise and say, listen, I'm going to give you this raise, but my expectation now is that your output is going to match the increase in money that I'm giving you. And he understands that. He's like, okay, now the investment that I've made financially and time and energy, et cetera, is going to come back to me. It's going to be a return on that investment. And so I love it when I give money and it brings back friends. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of investing. So if I invest in my people, I trust them, I train them, I empower them to act on my behalf, that's when I can finally step away from day-to-day operations.
What I love about that framework is you really did create an entrepreneurial blueprint of how to own a company. And that's really the job of the owner and or the principal. Yep. Is to do those 4 things. And I really like the order that you put them in, because you really are building something that's sustainable, which is the purpose of every business, is trying to build a sustainable company that's not tied to one single person. I guess another challenging question, I suppose, is, are there certain businesses or certain industries that are more challenging than others to exit without exiting? If I was to tell myself a lie that, well, that sounds all real great, Jason, but my industry doesn't work that way, and my industry needs the owner to close deals, or my industry doesn't operate that way. Do you find that to be true? Do you find that to be just limiting beliefs?
I think those are mostly limiting beliefs. It goes back to hero syndrome. I think that we get locked into that. But the baseline of your question is, are there industries where this is harder to accomplish? Outside of mindset, for sure. Yes, there are. And that is the technical industries. So for example, lawyers, CPAs, doctors, dentists, people that have certifications or degrees or licenses to do a certain task. Those people, it's harder, because by nature, and it could be even like an electrician or a carpenter. It doesn't have to be the higher end. It could be the lower end of those skills. But any skilled worker or skilled entrepreneur, it's harder for them to get out, because by the natures, they've created a business based on their technical ability.
Sure.
And so it is going to be harder to exit that business. However, it is not impossible. And there are a few tricks and tips along the way to figure out how to do that. First of all, if you're one of those people, CPA, attorney, etc., do not name your company
after you.
Your name. Because if you do that, not only are you locked it into the fact that you are the person, the technician, now you are the brand behind that company, and you're the only person that'll be able to compensate. Now, there are certainly exceptions to that rule. There are some very huge law firms that we probably see billboards and television advertisements. We think they're only in our town, and they're actually national firms, and they've somehow figured out how to grow beyond their personal name. But that's not the norm. Not most people, and probably not you, are going to be able to do that, right? Most people aren't going to be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. So that's the one little trick. But the other thing is, you've got to, that hero syndrome is tough for doctors and lawyers and dentists and CPAs, because I mean, I've got my CPA, you know, he's the most senior person in his firm. He owns the firm, of course, and he's a client of mine. And I got a whole funny story behind that too, but he's a client of mine after I became a client of his, because he kept calling me at like 8:00 at night, asking me questions like, dude, why are you working? You own the company. You're calling me at 8:00 at night, asking me tax questions. This is unacceptable. And he finally came into my cohort, exit accelerator, and things are changing for him. But if you're the most senior person by 20 years, okay, that's a problem. You've got to go hire someone who can come in and take on some of that, because the thing is, most people aren't entrepreneurs. Most people are just employees, and that's okay. We need people that are just employees to run the business. So we got to go find those people. So is there a 20-year CPA out there who's very happy being a W-2 employee, very happy doing tax returns, very happy giving strategy advice, and you are relegated as the owner, as the main technician, of just looking at the documents and saying, yep, everything's good. Okay, how long does that take? Half a day, once a week? Maybe. So there are ways to do it as a technician, but yes, a technical position, lawyers, doctors, CPAs, dentists, carpenters, electricians, those are the harder ones to get away from.
What I also love about, you know, your entire subject matter and the content you put out is that there's a conventional school of thought that in order for you to find freedom, you have to save a bunch of money and or invest in real estate. Like those are the paths. Like save a bunch of money, put in your 401k, so that when you're 65, you have some money, or, you know, save your money and put it into real estate as passive investments, what have you. But there's this operating business entire ecosystem that people actually don't think about or not exposed to for whatever reason. And so I love that you're talking about this stuff as openly and as simply as you are, because investing in a company is the same thing as investing in a piece of property. It has different complexities, but people also forget that real estate is a business too. It's not like you can just write a check. I mean, if you're a direct investor, right? I guess there's possibility to invest passively in real estate. But if you're an active principal owner of a piece of property, there are similar problems in a piece of property than there are in a business. So in your experience, you know, and you, I know you own both, and in your diversified portfolio, you have multiple companies and you have real estate. Tell me a little bit about what you find to be the difference in how you look at that.
So I love what you just said there, because most people don't get what you just said. Most people don't think about business investing the same way they think about real estate investing. And sure, there are lots of differences. Real estate, depending on what the type that you go in, has very, very little moving parts. It's usually it's either a piece of land or a commercial building or a residence that doesn't require daily interaction with customers in order for you to create income. And that's the beauty of real estate, right? However, one of the big differences between real estate and business investing, because you can invest in a business, not run it. Like you can say, listen, I'll stroke you a check, I want to own it, but there's already teams and places that run everything. And you could just continue to keep the seller's discretionary earnings, the SDE. You could continue to earn that just like you could in real estate. And what most people don't understand, although I'm not giving tax advice, I need to qualify this. What most people don't know is that real estate is taxed as passive income. And I think most real estate investors know real estate income is taxed at a lower rate because of the nature of what it is. Do you know that if you own a business and you work less than 500 hours a year in that business, it is taxed the same way as real estate income? Now, again, this is not tax advice. Please check with your CPA, but that's what I know. That's how I operate my businesses. I own, I've got 7 or 8 businesses that are active right now. One, I'm taxed as earned income. All the rest are passive.
And I'm not going to give tax advice either. But the other thing that people don't, and not to go off too topic, but like in real estate, you can get depreciation benefits. But when you buy a company, you can get amortization benefits.
Yes.
So there are tax benefits. Again, we're not tax guys and we're not giving tax advice. But the reason why I brought this up is because I really wanted to, on this platform and speaking to you specifically is like break this notion that, in order to find true freedom, you got to make money in your W-2 or your company, and then you got to invest in real estate. It's like absolute opposite of that. And there's multiple opportunities for looking at different types of, avenues.
I think if you've got somebody listening who is 100% into real estate and that's what they know and understand, all right, you might not want to venture into investing in a business. Now, buying a business to operate is one thing, but buying a business as an investment is a completely different thing. So if you're thinking about investments and you want to diversify your portfolio, well, buy commercial real estate, buy a mobile home park, buy some multiple residential real estate. There are many ways, or flip land, flip houses. There's lots of different ways to do a diversified real estate portfolio. But if you know business, that may be better than investing in real estate. And actually, that's where I am right now. I started a real estate investing company with my wife a few years ago. And actually, we've only owned a couple of small properties and found that we didn't like the risk profile and the low cash flow. Now, I understand that we were playing small. So if anybody wants to ding me and say, well, you just didn't do it right. You're right. I didn't do it right. But here's the thing. I understand business, and I could stroke a check for a business, and I could make that business hum and pay me just as much or more. Well, actually a lot more in cash flow than a real estate deal. But the difference is the real estate is going to appreciate over time in a predictable way in most cases. Businesses, not so much. I mean, a lot depends on who's the president, who's in Congress, what's going on in the worldwide economy. Your businesses can ebb and flow, or there could be a lawsuit, or an employee could get hurt, a vendor could sue you. I mean, there's a lot of things, but I'm comfortable with all of that because I understand business. I've built multi-million-dollar business. I know how to run them. I know how to process them. I know how to systematize them so that I don't have to run the daily operations. So for me, I'm actually straying. As a matter of fact, that's the first time I said this publicly, especially on a podcast. But I'm actually turning off my real estate. I'm done. I'm going to dissolve my real estate company because I'm doubling down on.
Love it.
That doesn't mean I'm not interested. That doesn't mean I'm not interested in real estate, but I'll still do it. But
well, the thing that people, and I love what you just said, and I appreciate you communicating that publicly. I don't know if, I have an operating background too. I don't have a real estate background, although I have some exposure in real estate as well. But again, and I'll say this over and over, like the reason why I love talking about this with you is that there is a very strong notion that you cannot run companies, you cannot own businesses, and often businesses actually provide a much better return, like not even sometimes 4 or 5x the cash flow return of a piece of real estate. But people identify it with all the risks you just mentioned. But those risks, just like a piece of property, whether it's a property manager or an asset management company, or maybe tenants who are your customers, like you have similar problems, insurance, legal, all those things with real estate as well. So if you're going to solve those problems, you might as well solve them in your operating business. So I think it's just a mindset thing, and that's why I wanted to crack this nut with you. So,
well, I think to do just a short, fast comparison between investing in real estate and investing in a business with the same amount of money. So let's pretend for a minute you could go out and buy a single family or a duplex for a couple $100,000, depending on where you are in the world. That obviously that number is going to differ. Well, how much you're going to make on that? How much you're going to make? So if you go with the 1% rule, which I think most real estate investors know, if they're renting out if you spend $200,000 on it, you should rent it for $2,000. That's really kind of where you're at on a monthly basis. Well, if you're leveraging 100% of your $200,000, then your cash flow on that is going to be really low. Your cash flow on a $200,000 property, if you amortize that over 20 years, 5%, I don't know what that number is, but you're probably going to cash flow $600, if that, on a monthly basis on a $200,000 investment. If you fully leverage. Now, if you write a check,
so we're talking about like 4 or 5% annually, if that.
Yeah, if that. So. And there's not a problem with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So I want to make sure that people don't not hear me saying I'm trying to poo-poo real estate, but there's nothing wrong with that. But take that same 200 and you go out into the business market and you look at businesses. You could find, again, not saying this is ideal, but you could find a Subway somewhere. We all know Subway sandwiches, right? Find a Subway franchise that's been in operations, already running, and the owner is ready to retire. He or she may own one. You could probably pick up that store for less than $200,000, and your cash flow on that could be almost 6 figures annually without having to operate a store and make sandwiches for a living. Now, the difference is you got a lot of moving parts. You got food costs. There's a lot that you won't have with real estate, but your cash flow. My point is, with me, because I understand business, cash flow and buying and investing in businesses, there's a much greater potential on that side than real estate. And I'm not saying,
yeah, we're not advocating, but just showing the comparison. What are you working on now, based on everything you're learning? I know you just said you're sort of not looking so much at real estate, but like, what are some of the biggest challenges you're dealing with now and working to overcome? And what does the next 3 to 5 years look like for you?
Well, I think that I'm 46 years old, and my kids are grown. My son's 21, my daughter's 19. He does not live with us anymore. My daughter still lives at home, but she's busy with her jobs. So we don't see her much. So we feel like the kind of empty nesters. But my wife and I constantly have conversations about, just like most married couples. We've been married for 26 years. We're high school sweethearts. We're best friends, and we talk about, even on this trip, we're out of town for a couple of weeks right now. We're talking about, well, what's next? What do we do next? And we were talking this morning over breakfast about how if I could go back 20 years, 25 years, I would have looked immediately for ways to make passive income so that I could do whatever the heck I want to do otherwise. Whether it's, I'm really into motorcycles. I love riding motorcycles. I love cars. I don't own any exotic cars, but I would love to, right? I would love to have done that. But because I was late to the game as an entrepreneur, I didn't start until 11 years ago in my 30s, right? So I was late to the game as an entrepreneur. By the time I went from unemployed school teacher to millionaire, I was already pretty far along and set in my ways of running a business rather than investing. Mm-hmm. And so I was too late to figure that out. So I would love to go back now. But what am I doing now? Is I am on the hunt for the Holy Grail, which is what business or businesses can I buy that produce amazing cash flow without requiring me to be active in that business. So we started an e-commerce store, an Amazon store, back in January of 2021, and I let one of my apprentices run that. And he didn't do a great job, although I wasn't expecting him to. He did a great job managing it at first, but now that I've reinserted myself back in that to kind of put eyesight on it, I only have a 45-minute call once a week with my VA in Pakistan. He runs all the back end for me, and dude, we've sold. I don't really want to say it, but in the last 30 days,
crushing it.
Oh my gosh! And we're not even to Christmas. Like, we're just now entering Christmas season. Cyber Monday was yesterday, but I think that's something I'm really excited about right now. I've engaged about 3 different companies to help me identify other e-commerce brands that are for sale, because I really think that's because I understand systems and processes. If I can buy an e-commerce brand that is throwing off significant cash flow, and I can spend 5 hours a week making sure that thing is operating on every cylinder, that's what I'm interested in. But I'm also interested in traditional brick and mortar. There's a funny story. We came down here to Key West, and I don't want to give too many details away because I don't want if the person happens to listen to this, but I was on Craigslist looking for golf cart rentals because I wanted to rent a golf cart while we were down here. And I found a business for sale that rents golf carts. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Let's go check it out. So we got in our truck and we drove over to the business. Check it out. What does it look like? Now, I don't know that we'd be interested in buying that, but based on the numbers on that Craigslist ad, if they're telling the truth, and you never can tell, but that business, again, since I didn't say the name of the business, I can give it away, but they're asking less than $1 million, but the owners don't work in it, and the owners are making about $250,000 a year. Now, if that's true, okay, let me stroke the check. I'll stroke the check. The guys here still run the thing, and I'm going to take home $250,000 a year. That's the type of investing I'm looking for right now.
Love that. What is true richness mean to you, my friend?
True richness. I think richness, if you talk about just the term rich, means to me just means a lot of money as compared to not a lot of money. So in one country, someone who's rich might only make $10,000 a year, where in another country, somebody making $100,000 is not rich. So it's all relative. But for me, I'm more interested in wealth than richness. And wealth, if you go back and look at the actual word wealth, it means flow. It actually means flow. It's not accumulation. So someone who's rich may have accumulated not a lot, but they're not wealthy because the money doesn't flow. And so what I want to be is a conduit for money. I want to be a good conduit where it comes into me and it goes out to others. And that's to me, to use your term richness, that's what I think about. I think about wealth. Rich, yeah, it's just having a lot of money, but wealth is money flowing, where I'm taking it in and pushing it to other people, and I'm making the world a better place.
So beautiful. It's really a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate you breaking down the 4 steps and talking to us about this, real estate and businesses and what you're working on. Like, real pleasure, man. It's been fun. This was cool.
Honor's all mine. I love talking about this, and I've got my own podcast, and I'm usually the one asking the questions. So when I get to sit on the other side of the microphone, as it were, it's always exciting to get to talk about things like that. So you've asked great questions, so it's been fun.
It's awesome. So how can actually people find you? And I know you're really public on social, but how do people get in contact with you?
So The Real Jason Duncan is what is my handle on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can look me up. It's The Real Jason Duncan, and or therealjasonduncan.com. But if you are interested in getting over the hero syndrome, and you want to quit lying to yourself, and you want to figure out how to actually exit your business without selling it to a third party, my next cohort starts very soon. And I'll tell you briefly about what that is. It's 12 weeks. We only meet 8 times, and it's me live. So it's not pre-recorded. It's not the stuff where you have to download on your own. I actually do it live, but I only take 12 people at a time. And so it's 8 sessions over 9 weeks or over 90 days. And it's exitwithoutexiting.com. And you can go, what I tell people is, you give me 24 hours and I'll change your life, because it's 8 hours with me and then 2 hours between each session where you'll work with your partners, because there's 12 of you from all over the world. I've had people from Dubai, South Africa, and Hungary, and here in the United States. It doesn't matter where they are. They're just people that understand there's more to life than running day to day. So you can go to exitwithoutexiting.com to learn more.
Such a pleasure. Really honored for you to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for dropping all your wisdom, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, man.